Hey there, welcome to today's video, and this video is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. In this video, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a brand new developer who pretty much has no idea what they're doing. And so, how do you tackle reading the dreaded documentation? And that's pretty much what this is about. Just like you can see right here, reading the documentation. And let's just get straight into it. Imagine you start out with this project right here, and you just put in a text widget because you saw somewhere that's how you represent text in Flutter. But you want to know more. You want to know how to use this widget right here, the text widget. You want to know how to change the style of the text. You pretty much want to know what exactly it is that you can do. If possible, you want to know every possibility that you have before you. So yeah, let's just use the text widget as an example. So as you may already know, whatever the name of the widget is also the name of the class. Saying that this is the text widget is pretty much the same as saying this is the text class. All widgets are classes essentially. And so what you would do is you just paste in the name of the widget, in this case it's text, and you just do text class Flutter, and you just put this in your search engine. And here we are, and in this case it'll be the first result, but sometimes it could be the second or the third. But it's not hard to know what it is. It's literally the name of the widget and then class, like so. It's not text style class, it's text class. Pretty simple. So once you're here, you might be overwhelmed because this is a bunch of information everywhere. Like, what the hell is this on the side? There's just a bunch of information everywhere. So basically, you're here for the text class. So don't allow yourself to be distracted by this little sidebar here, because this is pretty much just all their classes, and you can literally just scroll down and see what it's got, but it's pretty much just a list of stuff that isn't what you're trying to find out about. There's extensions and there's mixins, there's functions. It's kind of just a list of almost everything that's available. And this side right here is pretty much what is included within this documentation. So yeah, if you want, you could look through this and just click whatever you don't know. For example, where the hell is the locale? You just click it, and here you go. We have a small explanation. Sometimes, it'll be like exactly like this, which is a very small explanation. However, in this case, I feel like it's okay that it's small. It's a pretty simple concept, so why bother making it long? But even if you read this and you would still be confused, you could always just search for more information about it on whatever search engine you want to use. But going back to the text widget, this is what you want to focus on, okay? The thing in the middle. And pretty much all other widgets will be similar when it comes to the documentation. Of course, the text class it might just be one of the most used widgets in Flutter, because you always need to have some sort of text in your apps, even if you're just explaining something. So obviously the documentation will be very well done, and sometimes that won't happen, but it is what it is. I'm pretty sure Flutter's team works hard every day to ensure that the documentation is well made for every widget, but some of them will only improve as time moves forward. So sometimes you just gotta be patient and maybe search other stuff, like see if somebody asks a question about it on Stack Overflow or something like that. But anyway, here we are, and you have no idea what you're doing. So the first thing I want you to know is that this text right here, the one that's right below the title of the page, is pretty much just a small definition of what the widget or class actually does. And sometimes it's pretty poorly explained. Like, imagine this would only have this line. Like, what would be the point of this line, right? A run of text with a single style. Instead of this, it could just said, this is how you display text in your apps, or something just more simple. Sometimes the problem with the documentation is that it kind of feels like it's not talking to another human, but rather they're just talking to like a very experienced senior developer. But just be patient, and you'll eventually get used to the lingo and how things are addressed. It's just a matter of practice. But after this line, it's actually pretty helpful. Like, it says, the text widget displays a string of text with a single style. And then it even tells you how it behaves according to certain scenarios. Like, it says it can break across multiple lines, or it just might be all displayed on the same line. It depends on how you're laying out the text and where you're laying it out. And then it even talks about the style argument, because they already know that if you're going to use the text widget, there's like a 99.9% probability that you want to style it differently than whatever you're given. Because just look at this, what are the odds that when you need to use string of text, you want it to look like that. I mean, they're very small, just like the text right here. But anyway, this is just pretty much explaining where the default text style comes from. And if you're confused about anything, for example, if you're reading this and it says the text will use a style from the closest enclosing default text style, and you're like, what the hell is this? Then you can literally just click this and see what's up. It'll tell you it is the text style to apply to the send text widgets which don't have an explicit style. At this point, you're like, oh, okay, so basically if I don't give it a style, this is the default style that the text gets. Pretty simple stuff. And then, a little bit more details, but this is just, you can read it if you want to. It's up to you. I'm just going to move along. More importantly is that after the first text right here, you usually have an example. You won't always have an example, but most of the times I feel like you do have an example. And then you just need to know how to read the example. Basically, in this case, you can see two different examples, and then you see the code written right here. And it's really easy to figure out which of these corresponds to what. Like, you can read the text string right here, and it says a full sentence, so this is the one that this code is representing. And at this point, you can be like, okay, so this is how it works. Let me see how the hell this works. So you just completely ignore whatever you had and just paste what's there, And from here, you can figure it out on your own. In this case, let's just get rid of this variable and just say Flutter Mentor, for example. And then you just hit the save button and boom. Now that looks like what was being shown in the example. And now you can be like, oh, text align, what is this? And always pay attention to what is where. In this case, you're in the text widget, and these are the properties. You can tell. And sometimes you have to add an extra comma like this just to make it more organized. But as you can see, they're all lined up correctly, meaning that all of these arguments right here belong to this widget right here. These are the widget properties, basically. And you can just play around. Like, if you see something with a dot, usually you can do this and type in the dot, and you'll see the other options. And you'll be like, okay, so that was center. What happens if I do end? And then you save it. And then nothing happens and you're confused. But if you come over here and you tap this button right here, then you have this little button over here that says show debug paint. And if you click it, you will see that your text is only occupying this much. If it was occupying the whole thing, it would literally go to the right. And in fact, let me just go ahead and make that happen. Instead of this text, let's wrap this with a column, hit the save button, and now do you see how it goes up like that? And these lines right here are what the column is. But if I come over here and I do cross-axis alignment dot stretch, I hit the save button, now the text will go to the end. And if I, instead of end, do a dot, then we hit the start, and if I save it, it will go to the left. So sometimes you will be trying something and it won't work out. And instead of thinking, oh, maybe Flutter just doesn't work correctly, always assume that it's you who doesn't know what's going on, and it's pretty much your job to figure out why something would not be working. And then, if you're confused, for example, you see overflow. What the hell is overflow? You can do Control Q, and it literally tells you a small definition right here. And now I'm going to show you something. I want you to remember what it says right here, which is how overflowing text should be handled. And now I'm going to click here, and we're just going to go ahead and skip a little bit down, overflow right here, and then we can click this, and we can click this as well. And as you can see, it's an enum. But the thing I want to show you is that this right here is exactly what it said before. And that's because whenever you use Control Q, you're essentially reading the documentation that is the same as the website. Because if you use Control plus click, then it takes you to the actual class that this belongs to. In this case, it's the paragraph.dart file. And here you have the actual documentation that they also use on the website. But I don't want to get you too confused. Let's go back a bit over to the example again. I was just telling you what to do. If an example is confusing, then just copy it and try it out for yourself. Try to make changes for yourself. And this will be very helpful to figure out what does what. Nothing's better than actually putting it to practice. That's exactly the best way to learn every single time. And then, there's another example because there's actually something called text.rich that you can use if you want to style words differently. So as you can see, you can just use text.rich, and then you have the option to use the text span, and within that you have the main text, which is the first text, and then you can create the different children. And this could be super confusing to you, so you just copy this and you pretty much just paste it into your project, and that will allow you to just play around with it and change some details here and there, and that will allow you to better understand what the hell is going on here. Then you keep going down, and as you can see, they even tell you about interactivity, like how to make your text react to touch events. And they also recommend that you consider using a text button instead. This is pretty much just the Flutter team trying to guide you in the right direction. That is essentially what the documentation is for, to help guide you in the right direction. That's about it. And as you can see, you also have suggestions that are related to this that you can also click around. This is pretty much something that can take you down the rabbit hole. Like you can click here, and then as you can see, there's other stuff here, and you can click here. Kind of like that Wikipedia game that you can just click stuff and see where you get to. As you can see, you can pretty much almost click something. You can even click on the bull. But my advice here is don't get too lost in this. Try to be focused on what you're actually trying to find out. Don't lose sight of the purpose. But anyway, we always get to a point where we have this type of information right here. So the inheritance is basically just so you know what abstract class the widget or the class belongs to. In this case, the text widget belongs to the stateless widget, but sometimes they have different abstract classes that are more specific. And you can tell that right here. For example, this center widget has this child property, and if I do Control Q, it tells you what type of class it expects. In this case, it expects a class type of widget, as you can see either here or here. And you also have style right here. As you can see, it expects the type textile. So you use the textile class because that's the type that goes here. But sometimes the type that a property expects is an abstract class, and the actual widgets that you need to use there will be differently named. And that's pretty much what inheritance is about. You can click the video on the top right now to see exactly what I mean by this. I made a whole video dedicated to being able to figure out what goes where when it comes to placing classes within properties. But anyway, now let's go to the constructors. This might be, very confusing to look at first, but it's not that hard. As you can see, most of it is just repeated information like text align, text align, text direction, locale. I would say don't get too lost in this. You will eventually be comfortable with reading this, and if you don't know what something is, you already know. You can just click it. But usually, in these cases, what I tell people is come to the widget right here, and then go to where the next property comes from, and just type in Control plus space. And this is pretty much all the properties that you can use for this class. In this case, the text class. And this is just a simpler way to look at this information right here. The thing is, I want you to pay attention to something, because the text widget is unique in a certain aspect. Because as you can see, and let me just find a different one just so I can show you the difference. I'm going to use, for example, the container. Let's go to the constructors of the container. And as you can see, there's even sometimes a video accompanying the widget instead of an actual example. But let's go over to the constructors part. In this case, we have both a video and an example. But over here to the constructors, as you can see, it says the name of the class, and then it has the parentheses, and then it has curly braces straight away. But if you come over here to the text widget, it only has parentheses, and only after this right here does the actual curly braces pop up. And the thing is, the curly braces are for named arguments. And if there are no curly braces like this, then it's a positional argument. And whenever there is a positional argument, you have to place it there first before you are able to access the named parameters. For example, this right here is the positional argument. As you can see, there's no named parameter before we put it here. And I can't come over here and try to put in a named parameter here. It just won't work. And I can even show you, like, for example, key. I could try to do key, but it'll just break everything because it's not allowed. You have, when it comes to positional arguments, it's in the name, positional. So you need to position it correctly. So that's just a little detail I wanted you to pay attention to. Essentially, the information that is in the constructors is the properties that you're able to fill in to customize your widget. In fact, if you just come down, here are the properties, and this is really cool. You pretty much get a small description of each property in case you have no idea what it does. For example, overflow can be confusing, and it just tells you how visual overflow should be handled. And this isn't the best description. Basically, they're just saying how to handle when the text overflows from the space that it's supposed to be contained within. That's pretty much what it is. And as you can see, there's a bunch of other options. So let's just go and say, for example, text direction. It defines the directionality of the text. Let's say you're making an app and you're making a version for Saudi Arabia, for example, and there, they type from right to left instead of left to right, like in the western part of the world. So we just go ahead and do control space just so you can see what's up. Then you go to text direction, and now you already know that you do control Q, right? So you already know that this takes a text direction. So let's just go ahead and type in text direction and see if it works. So it doesn't. In this case, you could be confused. So, you just go ahead and you click like, what is wrong? Because this is what you're trying to put in. This is the name of the property, and you can tell by the lowercase at the beginning. And this is the name of the type of the class that the property expects. So that's why I clicked text direction. And as you can see, it's an enum. So here you already know that it's an enum. So all you need to do is select the correct enum, basically. Of course you can read the whole documentation. It's never a bad idea to read the documentation. And coming back here, now that we know that it's an enum, we can just do the dots and we know we have the options. And there they are, from left to right, which it's the default thing. But there's also right to left. And if I hit the save button now, you will see that now we see the difference from the question mark. I'm not sure how, right to left works, but I'm guessing this is right. At least that's what's going on right now. And I'm going to choose to trust Flutter here and just say that this is correct. But anyway, other than that, then you have the methods and the operators. The operators isn't too important. It's basically just, so you know how to compare to certain things, but I'm not going to get into this because honestly, I don't think you'll be needing this at all. Maybe in a very specific case, but if you do, just leave me a comment and I'll just make a video specifically on this. More importantly is the methods. Usually when you have a widget, you don't really need to access the methods, but you never know. And also sometimes you might need just a method from a class of your own. And this is just pretty much the methods that are available either within the class or maybe they're just available or relevant to this class. For example, toString is available in every single object of type string. And obviously the object of type string is very relevant for the text class. And this method right here is just a method that happens as an error. Like if you invoke a method that doesn't exist, you'll probably get an error like this one. But basically it's just, you could have a variable and then you just do toString. In this case I don't have a variable, but this would be what it would be. We can just go ahead and click, for example, the container class, and this one has more methods. But as you can see, you're still not really meant to use them. They're just more informational. So essentially what I want you to focus on when you visit the documentation is reading, maybe watching the video if it's there, or reading the small description, or looking at the examples. Over here, this is really important, the layout behavior. The best thing you can do for yourself is learn how the layout and the box constraints and everything related to that works on Flutter. If you can master that information, that will make you progress much faster in your Flutter learning. But just look at the examples. Like I said, when you don't understand, or just if you want to, just copy the example and play around with it. And if you're curious, check out what's related to this class as well, and always pay attention to the inheritance because it might be important. But it's more of an informational thing. And pretty much what you want to know the most is what are the constructors, by which I mean what are the properties and what does that property take. If you had no idea what to put in child, you could just come over here and be like, okay, child takes widget. What the hell is a widget? And then you just come over here and you would read it, and you would pretty much figure out that pretty much everything is a widget. And how would you figure out that? Because of the inheritance. Again, the inheritance is important. As you can see right here in the inheritance, the container comes from the stateless widget, which comes from the widget class. So you know that the container widget in this case is of type widget. because it extends the widget class. And if you want to know what that is, you can just read this right here. And also, you also have the annotations right here. When something is immutable, it just means it can't be changed. That's pretty much all it is. But of course, there's a bunch of small details that you'll just need to just search the information online. Stack Overflow is a huge help. Anytime you see a link of Stack Overflow that can be related to your problem, just go ahead and click it and see if it does solve your problem. They have many different answers. One of them might be specific for you, and that's pretty much all that it is. You just come over here. In this case, let's just imagine that you want to style the text widget, but you don't know how to do it. You just look for the property that would make sense. For example, this one is called strut style and this one is called style. Here you just read the description of both and figure out which one it is that you want, which in this case is pretty obvious. Right here it's telling you that strut style defines the struts, which sets minimum vertical layout metrics. At this point, you're probably thinking, what? And then here it says, if not null, the style to use for this text. It's pretty clear that if you want to style a text widget, we go with the style property. And in this case, it's already here, but if we didn't know, we could just click the text style because it's exactly what the style takes. We click it, and now we're here. And of course, we have examples and different examples too. We have an explanation of what's going on. Again, more examples. The documentation is well made. And if you're ever running into something that you can't find in the documentation, no matter how much you search for it, then just search for it online. Just being a programmer is pretty much just how good you are at Googling. That's kind of the most important skill, to be honest. The other most important skill is not quitting, having perseverance, and just continuing to search for it no matter what. If you can't find it after a week of searching for it, then just post the question in Stack Overflow and maybe you'll be lucky enough for somebody to reply to you. That's pretty much it. If you have any doubts, just feel free to ask them in the documentation. If this video helped you at all, please leave me a like. It's literally free. It costs you $0. It literally just costs you the effort of clicking. That's it. So I would really appreciate it if you could do it. And please subscribe if you want to support this channel, or if you want to keep on learning more and more about Flutter. That way you can just get the notification whenever a new video comes up. So before I go, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and best of luck on your journey to becoming a professional developer. Thank you so much for watching. This is Flutter Mentor, and out.